Hi, I'm Carys, and you're listening to Over the Top, Under the Radar, a weekly look at the stories in the news that are being overreported and the ones going completely under the radar and not being talked about enough. This week's co-host is the phenomenal Nim Ralph. Nim is a community organiser, trainer, facilitator and writer. They're a queer and trans rights activist who co-founded QTIPOC London, Purple Rain Collective and Edge Fund. Nim, thanks for joining me.
Hey, it's great to be here.
How's your week been?
It's been all right. It's, the big sprint up to winter break. So just seem to be sitting at this screen a lot, having a lot of meetings, trying to get everything finished before the year ends. But
yeah, there gets a point though when you get to just say everything, we can't do anything more before Christmas. And I am getting towards that point psychologically. I'm like, I'm starting to be like, should the meeting be in January? Should we maybe move on with that? So yeah, hoping everyone else has got that energy. Nim and I have taken a look at the news agenda and each picked one story that we think has gone over the top and one that has flown under the radar. My over the top for this week is Farage's schoolboy racism. Probably people will be familiar with this. I think it was The Guardian that first broke these allegations, although they've been floating around on the internet for a while. Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK, attended the elite Dulwich College, a South London private school. And for a while, but like recently surfaced and backed up by The Guardian, there have been accusations that when he was at school in the 1970s, he was racist and anti-Semitic to fellow schoolmates. This has got a decent amount of coverage, and it's been rumbling on as a political story for a few weeks now. The reason that I think it's over the top is not to do with whether the allegations are true. The Guardian in particular and other news outlets have gone to a lot of trouble to back up these allegations. So if you haven't seen them, the general gist of them is, and we've got 28 now of his like Dulwich College contemporaries who have described Schoolboy Farage saying racist, anti-Semitic things and generally being a bit of a bully. The most high-profile one is from a Jewish man called Peter, who said that Farage repeatedly told him Hitler was right and said, gas them. Last Friday, which kind of gave the story a bit more juice, someone else who was at school with Farage said when he was 17, he got told to go back to Africa. I think these allegations look pretty well supported. I think it is very likely they are true. And I don't want to call that into question. The allegations were horrible and credible. It must have been really awful. It's horrible being bullied at school, and it's appalling to be bullied with sort of racist, anti-Semitic, xenophobic undertones. Second thing I want to say is the reason this story has had legs is that Farage's response was poor. When the allegations first surfaced, he was like, didn't happen, fake news. When the allegations seemed more credible, he was like, just banter, didn't matter. And now his kind of latest weird response, which involved yelling Bernard Manning a lot and kind of going for the BBC, surprise, surprise, was everyone did it. It was the 1970s, black and white minstrel show was on the BBC. So part of the reason this story's had legs politically is because he hasn't had a strong response. He hasn't had a strong rebuttal. Even Kemi Badenoch, who's not known as a champion of racial equality, has come out to say he should apologise. So I'm not disputing that he might have said racist things, and I'm not disputing that someone having a poor response gives the media a chance to keep talking about something. But I do worry that it's slightly missing the point about how we undermine Farage and beat reform. Have you heard the allegations, Nim? What did you think?
I have, and I'm not going to lie, I've been watching with enjoyment and curiosity because I feel like for once, I mean, I was going to say our side. I'm not sure the BBC is our side, but are using their tactics. And I'm curious of they do this so much where they come for a character assassination and we are so inept at knowing how to defend ourselves because we're always like, here's the complexity of the situation. Seeing them use this strategy the other way round, and for Kemi to come out and say she literally said he should put his big boy pants on. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. This is interesting data.
Yeah, I do think, and you're right. What we should be clear about is there's a real popcorn quality to this. It's so rare. Farage has a complete Teflon streak. He manages to do all manner of nonsense and get away with it. So he presents himself as a man of the people. He's mega rich, mega posh, worked in the city, takes all this money from GB News. There's recent allegations that he overspent in his election campaign. He broke the spending guidelines in 2024. So nothing sticks to Farage. And for some reason, this has stuck. And you're right. We should enjoy it. We should fill our boots. We should eat popcorn. Also, let's be clear, if Kemi's piling in, there's momentum. Like, she doesn't really care about racial inequality, famously because she doesn't experience racism, so probably none of the rest of us do. So taking aside, it's fun to see Farage on the back foot, and like it's also, it's also fun to see him sort of spinning out and not quite knowing how to handle something. I do think that, like, at its base, I'm not sure if this is the right way to attack him. So, like, there are a couple of things. I think the first thing is, I don't think anyone should really be held accountable for stuff they did when they were in school, especially when there were like decades between when they did it and now. So, like, I have a bit of discomfort at this idea that the gotcha Farage is that when he was a teenager, he was racist. Like, surely the more important thing is that, like, he's racist now and he wants to do stuff that's going to, like, harm Black and brown people now. So, like, I have a bit of a, like, I don't think he's right. And I think the, like, ethical and sensible and pragmatic thing to do, I can't believe I'm agreeing with Kemi here, would be to apologize for what he said and what he did, given it looks like he did say and do it. But I guess, like, whilst I am eating my popcorn, throwing it at the screen, cackling with glee, like, let's not pretend I'm not, another part of me is being like, should people be responsible for what they did when they were a teenager? How would I feel if this was someone I politically agreed with? Like, don't we get the grace to sort of make mistakes and mess up when we're a teenager? I don't know. Like, am I being too empathetic with Farage?
No, broadly, I would agree with that position. And I think what's missing in the strategy or whatever we call it in this moment is connecting why it's relevant that what he said then is still what he says now. And I actually think the part of this that is sticking and that is interesting to me, because I think it's sticking not in his base, but in his more passive support, is the nature of what he said. Because to say Hitler was right is so inherently anti-British that it really goes against a lot of his broader support. And I think that what's missing is that, like, savvy connection to that and now.
Yeah, you're right. There are the kernels of an attack that could be really powerful, just like when people point out his fairly numerous and sketchy ties to Russia. It's like undermining what he says about himself, which is like, I am a patriot. I know what's best for Britain. And also, like, these are views that are and should be, although, the world is changing so rapidly, like beyond the pale unacceptable. So I think, yeah, they're bad things to have done. And you're right, the missing bit is to connect it to now and to be like, he is still like this, which I guess his lack of apologizing does slightly. But I think the bigger point that I worry about is I'm sat here with my popcorn. We're all enjoying it. Lobby journalists and the sort of Westminster bubble are like, he's on the back foot. But if we really think about what the biggest threat is, which is that in 3 or 4 years' time, Nigel Farage will have the keys to Downing Street, or at least very good access to Downing Street in some sort of a pact with the Tories. Like, the people we need to worry about now are the people who are thinking about voting for him. And I'm not convinced that, like, I worry that this is just preaching to the choir. People who already don't like Nigel Farage can be like, see, he's a wanker. He's always been a wanker. And, it's case study led to get these powerful stories of people when they were young being abused and bullied. But my fear is there's a massive chunk of people who, like, the thing that they think is that Nigel Farage is the only person who can get the job done on immigration, or that Nigel Farage is like the best way to send a signal that, like, this system isn't working for them and they want radical change. I worry that for those people, they might rightly be like, he did it at school. That's not something I need to worry about now. But I think, like, the other challenge is that the way that is that it adds to this sense that Farage is like an anti-establishment figure. And you'll see now, I mean, his response to these allegations have been bad, like uncharacteristically bad. But what he's landed on now is attacking the BBC. And, like, A, that's his comfort zone. He loves to do it. But B, it's part of this populist narrative where it's like everyone's out to get him, the establishment, the system. They're trying to bring him down. They're trying to smear him. So, like, I worry in some ways it might even play into his hands, and that the glee that people who already didn't like him get from being like, I was right to not like him, he's horrible, is like short-lived short-lived and of limited political value. And then I guess the second thing that I wanted to talk to you about as well is like, I actually think the final of his responses after it didn't happen, it was just banter, has like the kernel of something that really gets to the heart of like what is wrong with our political conversations in the UK. Because he's right about the 1970s. He's right about Bernard Manning and the black and white minstrel show. He's right that the BBC and lots of our cultural institutions and teachers and like people who had a platform did say racially inappropriate things in the 70s. And like he was a teenager, but it kind of gets to this thing of like, we're not able to reckon with our racism as a country and like how recently it happened. And I worry that, yeah, I don't think the story has a reasonable account for like why we should be persecuting and being angry about a boy who grew up in the 1970s and absorbed a lot of the racism behind him. To be clear, I don't think that Nigel Farage is like someone that needs exoneration or any sort of like sympathy. But we're talking about 10 years before Nigel Farage is at school yelling abuse at Jewish pupils, was the Smethwick by-election where the Conservatives won by saying, want an N-word for a neighbour, vote Labour. Yeah, the bits that worry me are, I don't think we're going to persuade the people we need to persuade to not vote for Farage by throwing allegations about what he did when he was a teenager. And then secondly, yeah, UK was more racist in the 1970s. I mean, I think neither of us were born then. And if we don't have a way of accounting for that and being able to say like that was wrong, and also it was the cultural norm, it was where the Overton window is, then I think we're never going to get to where we need to get to on race relations and racism. What do you think? Am I overthinking it?
I don't think you're overthinking it. And despite what I've said, I do sit with the same feeling. And I think I felt a like quandary about it because we always take the moral high ground in how we approach these situations, which is characteristic of like left and progressives using our values as our strategy. I personally wouldn't want to orchestrate this kind of attack on someone. And it actually, what's coming up for me is, do you remember this guy, Milo Yiannopoulos, from, I can't say his name, from the early
Bleach blonde
alt-right.
hair, gay, alt-right, when alt-right was still kind of new.
Yeah, he was getting book deals all over the place. And the only way that he got brought down was by focusing on his gayness. And it was a homophobic attack, essentially. It's slightly more complicated than that. Let's not get into that now.
Things he'd said about gay relationships with age
gap
disparity, which like people came for him on.
Whether or not it was problematic is a whole different conversation, but there was huge undertones of homophobia in what finally brought him down. But with Farage, we don't see this kind of attack used very often. And I just have a like strategic curiosity of whether or not this will actually be something that sticks. And not because I think you're right that like there is a chance of it backfiring. I don't think a lot of the people who support him care about his anti-black racism. But I do think there's something about the anti-Britishness of the comments that's possible to move if we can actually make that case.
Thank you to Em, Hannah and Olusola who recently signed up to support the show on Patreon. You have joined the team of a few hundred heroes who help to keep the podcast going. If you like Over the Top, Under the Radar and you can afford to support us financially, you're helping to ensure everyone on the team gets paid and you get a bonus episode each week. You're the first to find out who's coming on the show and you'll get to submit your own questions to guests. You can also access our Over the Top, Under the Radar WhatsApp community. And if you sign up to support us on Patreon this month, you will get an invite to our virtual Christmas party, which is happening in a couple of weeks. We're a tiny team making this podcast on an absolute shoestring. We only exist because a few hundred people chip in to support us on Patreon. To keep the show sustainable, we need 91 more supporters. So this Christmas, I'm asking you to join us if you can. If you've been listening and thinking, I'm glad this show exists, now is the time to support us. Patreon.com/over the top under the radar. What is your over the top for the week? What have you been hearing too much about?
My over the top for the week is the NHS Fife versus Sandie Peggy case. So this is the case of a nurse, Sandie Peggy in Scotland, took NHS Fife to tribunal for 47 allegations varying from discrimination through to harassment and all kinds of things because she went into the women's changing room and a trans doctor, Beth Upton, was using the women's changing room. And the reason that I think that this isn't over is that it has been reported so much from everywhere, from the Telegraph, who published at least five articles on the day of the tribunal, of the ruling, sorry, to the BBC as a partial win for Peggy. I said she made 47 allegations. She lost on 43. So technically, sure, it's a partial win, but the headline and the entire framing of the story has been, it's a win for her. She also, not only did she lose on 43 of the 47 allegations, she lost on every one she made against Beth Upton directly. And the only 4 that she succeeded on were on NHS5's handling of her complaint, not the actual interactions with Upton or the use of the changing rooms.
It's a good over because I think it touched on a few things that are really prevalent in the culture wars at the moment. But just for people who haven't got the broader context, is this all related to a previous verdict, or is this part of like a raft of legal challenges that are being made, often seemingly funded by J.K. Rowling, to attack trans people and like diminish their rights? Like, how does this sit within the other cases that we're getting so much press coverage about?
So one of the ways that gender critical lobbies, let's call them, are really focusing and mostly gaining ground in the UK in what I would call an anti-trans fight is through legal cases. There is just an onslaught of legal cases pushing the edges of any law that they can. So what is interesting here from my perspective, and is actually a win from my perspective, is a key aspect of the case was whether the Supreme Court's ruling on biological sex automatically makes it unlawful for a trans person to be able to use facilities for their required gender, i.e. single-sex facilities, and the tribunal ruled it did not. And actually, there was another case last week, also in Scotland, it was Kelly versus Leonardo, and it had the same ruling. And so we've now had 2 cases in 2 weeks that say that it's not unlawful for trans people to use single-sex spaces.
So the media are actually distorting what the verdict is to suit a gender critical agenda.
Yes.
Oh gosh, the worst. It's a really good over because, as you say, there are certain media outlets who like have a story they want to run and they're just going to run it. But it also follows like pretty hot on the heels of the Women's Institute and Girl Guiding UK saying that they can't admit transgender members. So it does feel like, and there's a funny coincidence because, you know, you and I were involved in a campaign around the Gender Recognition Act way back in 2018 when the Overton window on trans issues was completely different and a Conservative government was trying to bring in self-identification. So saying that as a trans person, you could say, this is my gender, this is my identity, and you didn't need loads of kind of medical rigmarole, which, sidebar, self-ID exists in loads of countries, including Ireland. The sky hasn't fallen in. Like, as someone who's a bit more plugged in as an activist, like, what happened between then and now? Like, 7 years on, we're like in the trenches trying to defend basic rights. And yeah, like it feels like everything is turned upside down. And I'm sure it's like a PhD length answer, but like, what shifted?
I never thought that I would think, God, wasn't it better when Theresa May was there? As horrific as all of her policies were. Let me just be clear, not a Theresa May fan.
No one's a Theresa May fan, but like, it's really in the context of what came next, isn't it? It's like, you're just like, this is bad. It's like George Bush looking good compared to Trump, you know? We end up in weird places.
Yeah.
But Theresa May was good on gender recognition, right?
She's the one who opened up the consultation for self. She was the one who recognised this is an arduous, horrendous process. We need to make it better. She opened up the consultation. And what that did is it activated a whole base of gender. They didn't define themselves this way then, but gender critical women in that sector. It also activated a lot of very supportive trans people and trans allies in those sectors. And they got really organised. And so you saw the suddenly popping up of things like Women's Place UK, Fair Play for Women, specifically around this. They had a problem to organise against trans people, particularly trans women. And so they got very organised and built a lot of infrastructure within their own bubble of the movement. On the other hand, we have trans people. We're not organising against something. we're resisting an attack on us. And despite, sometimes I like to call myself a trans activist because it's fun. And despite that being used against us a lot, all these trans activists, there are not many of us statistically out. We don't have a big movement. We don't have big infrastructure. We don't have access to a lot of resources. The best that we had at the time was Stonewall and Amnesty. And I think that they made huge strategic mistakes off the back of equal marriage, where there was so much public support at that point in time for gay people and gay marriage that you could use big, lofty slogans like love is love to really shift the dial, because it implied if you're not for love, you're for hate. And they tried to do the same thing in this instance, but the public ground support that you need didn't exist. So they came out with statements like trans lives are not up for debate, which is great if you know that the public already broadly agree with that. But they didn't, and they were confused, and they were confused by the questions being posed. So we lost a lot of ground. And then the TLD, the really short version of the next 7 years is that you've then got this very organized group of left-wing feminists who are organizing, gender critical feminists who are organizing against trans people. You then have huge amounts of the right who are anti-trans people.
And see that they can make hay with it, right? It becomes, the sort of Piers Morgan of it all. He identifies as a penguin. He's constantly asking people if women can have a penis. Like, they get clicks and they get attention and they get sort of a win from punching down.
And then we also had a very populist right-wing government who I think particularly learnt from Trump's tweets around the trans military ban and Obamacare, that this is a useful political football that can distract us from everything else. And so through the Johnson years and COVID scandals after COVID scandals, they were constantly leaking supposed policies on a Sunday to the right-wing press about new positions on trans people, and used it as a huge political distraction. And so you've got all of these different forces, the media, the government, the right wing, and a section of the left wing, all fighting against us. And we're just like trying to get by. And yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a bit there's a part of this. I know a lot of listeners are trans, love trans people, are personally impacted by this. There's a thread of this that connects to like a lot of our politics at the moment, which is like finding this sort of villainization of people who, like, objectively, if you just looked at the facts, are not thriving in like society. And I think that was really epitomized by, as you say, like trans activist has become a trope, but like Liz Truss's The Deep State came for me, and like trans activists, like the sort of absurdity of it was played out when Liz Truss claimed that, she was kicked out of office by trans activists in the civil service. There was like a, deep state. I think there were other people, but the one that really stuck out, just because it was like provably false, like there are not a ton of trans civil servants, like that actually the people with the least access to power. And I think we see it again play out with, as you said, the sort of so-called gender critical feminists. Yeah, like had a bit of a reaction to the idea they're all left wing. But in the UK, at least, a group of women who often have a lot of privilege and a lot of platform, J.K. Rowling being a great example, who do have access to journalists, who do have disposable income, to mount legal challenges, saying like, we are being persecuted, we are under threat. And then the media, I think, just really is complicit with this. I didn't know how many stories the Telegraph had run, but the Times and the Sun, Murdoch owned, no coincidence, for a long time have been sort of just steadily drip feeding anti-trans stories. So I mean, then in the context of that, is this court case a win for like trans rights activists? Like, is it actually a win and we just have to ignore the headlines, or is it a loss because the headlines are so bad? Like, what do you think?
I just want to clarify something I said, which is that I do not think all gender critical feminists are left wing, but I do think it's important that we acknowledge some of them are.
Yeah, you're right.
And also that some of them are feminists. And this is a spicy take, but I think, like, if you look at feminism, there's been white supremacist feminists. Like, I think the idea, I really resist and hate the idea that feminism is somehow pure.
Yeah, or feminism is what you believe and everyone else isn't a feminist. No, you're completely right.
It's contested ground that we have to fight for. Including, against racist white feminists, as well as, often they go together, transphobic feminists too. I mean, an interesting thing in the ruling is there were so many other things in that ruling that could have been used, including that there was a whole section on Sandie Peggy's numerous racist tweets, racist texts, sorry, to a group chat.
No.
Yeah.
Sandie Peggy's racist. Oh, come on.
Right. So there were other angles here that the media could have been interested in.
Of course she was racist. Oh, Lord.
Yeah. And yeah, I won't read them out, but they are pretty horrific.
Okay, so you're right. Some people are left-wing that oppose trans rights, and some are feminists.
100%. Is it a win? I actually think it is, in that it is demonstrated, like I said before, that the Supreme Court's ruling is contested ground still, and that there's more hope now for the scope of contesting that, and we can push for a more trans-inclusive practice and interpretation of that law, notably within a narrow legal terrain, which is, there are trans lawyers and legal professionals. There's not many of us. It's not a space that we have a lot of. We're not as resourced, let's say, as the other side. But we have great people doing great work. There are, including trans people and groups like Trans Legal Project and the Good Law Project doing the good work on that side. So yeah, I do think it's a win in that it's shown that there is hope here that we can get a more positive interpretation of what the Supreme Court ruling said.
Great. And we'll link to a couple of the groups you've mentioned in the show notes for people who are interested in learning more or supporting some of those organisations. Okay, it was a great over. We love it. We love a spicy take. What is your under the radar for the week?
My under the radar is Drax. Drax are the UK's largest emitter of CO2. Predominantly they're a bigger corporation, I think, company than this, but Drax Power Station is outside Leeds, and that power station's emissions are larger than the next 6 largest gas power plants combined.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's a biomass power station, which is what makes it unique, and that means it burns wood instead of coal. It burns more wood than any other facility in the world.
There you go, world leader.
The idea behind biomass is that it's forest waste and sawdust from mills and things that's turned into pellets, and that the pellets are then used as fuel. So it's positioned as a better for the environment than coal alternative. And Drax is also, in addition to having the power station, it's one of the biggest pellet producers in the world. And so it makes and distributes pellets all around Europe, Southeast Asia, and across the world.
Okay, so it makes the pellets that it also burns. So it buys the pellets off itself.
Yes. There's 2 reasons that this is under the radar for me this week. Number 1, and this is kind of more context as opposed to why it's relevant this week. Mm-hmm. Biomass generation is currently defined as carbon neutral in UK carbon budgets, so it's eligible for subsidies earmarked for renewable energy. Guess how much they receive a day in public subsidies, Carys?
10 grand?
£2 million.
No!
A day. A day.
A day. 2 million a day. What? Rachel. Yeah. Rachel, please, what are you doing?
It's bananas. And despite that, in 2023, Drax produced 8% of renewable electricity in the UK, which is less than 4% of the UK's total electricity. And the other thing this is wonky, but a kind of important part of the story, which is that it uses something called BECCS, which is a form of carbon capture from wood combustion, which hasn't been demonstrated at scale anywhere in the world, and is estimated to cost £1.7 billion in subsidies until 2050, owing to the rise of its costs.
So they're getting subsidies because they're quote unquote renewable, and they're getting subsidies for carbon capture, which, for those who don't follow, apologies if you work in the carbon capture industry, kind of snake oil. They were talking about carbon capture when I first joined the world of work 20 years ago. It's still unproven, and the idea is we'll just catch the carbon, put it in the earth, and then we don't need to worry about emissions. Okay, so they're getting some money for carbon capture, they're getting money for being quote unquote renewable, and what's brought them onto your radar this week?
The so-called science or rationale behind BECCS is based on sourcing the wood from waste, like I mentioned before, or from fast-growing forests, i.e. man-planted quick-grow forests to generate quick wood. what came out a few weeks ago, but there's a question in the House of Lords this week on it, is that Drax has been found to source its pellets from slow-growing old forests in Canada, which make carbon recovery models even more impossible. So these trees are centuries old. They're part of ancient ecosystems. And mature natural forests are also one of the best defenses against climate change that we have, because they absorb so much CO2, which means that also when you cut them down, all of the CO2 that they absorb is released into the atmosphere.
So the opposite of carbon capture, carbon release. So wait a second. Yeah. So are those trees coming to the UK, or are they doing that in Canada?
So they're cutting them down in Canada. They then mill them and turn them into pellet. They manufacture them in the US and Canada. And as a side note, Drax was also implicated in environmental racism because of where the mills are in the US and which communities have to live by the mills that are suffering with the after effects of all this wood being milled by them. And then they're manufactured into pellets there, and then they're shipped over here or sold to other power plants around the world. Research has shown that some old forests in British Columbia and Canada could take over 500 years to recover, if they could ever recover at all. Ofgem, the energy regulator, forced Drax to pay them £25 million, which, let's be honest, that's what's that divided by 2? Like 12 to 2 weeks worth of subsidies.
It's a couple of weeks, isn't it? It's not even a month. It's not even a month for the subsidies.
After it had submitted inaccurate data on the sourcing of its wood pellets, and a former senior lobbyist turned whistleblower there has also said that Drax has been misleading the public, government, and its regulator about its green.
So they've been straight up lying, allegedly. So according to these reports, they have been lying about where they've got the trees from. They're like, don't worry, bro. It's just like all this waste wood, these new forests, they just pop up and down. Whereas actually they're going to Canada, a very beautiful country, finding like 100-year-old trees and just like plowing them down and turning them into pellets and then lying about where they came from. Great. Cool. Absolutely wonderful.
We now have our electricity running off the manufacturing and destruction of Canadian forests.
Oof. Are Canadians mad at us?
I mean, I think the thing that is a bit complicated, which is part of Drax's defence, is that BC law is not sufficient to stop them doing British
Columbia, the part of Canada that they're the just tearing down trees in, turn them into pellets to burn.
Yeah. So they're angry at the province and they're angry at Drax. And in essence, what this means is we are charging our phones off old growth trees, ancient ecosystems.
Something about that feels incredibly sad.
Right? So sad.
So what can we, because you, as well as being a trans activist, having loads of experience in social movements in the UK, you also work in climate. So like what could be done if someone wanted to do something about this?
There's lots of voices on the ground in grassroots movements here, including the Stop Burning Trees Coalition, who are working to end public subsidies and hold Drax accountable. If you look them up, that's the Stop Burning Trees Coalition. And also it's underreported, so start talking about it, because I don't think you knew about this before. I
did not know about it. Carys. Completely under my radar. I feel I also feel like Ed Miliband. What are you doing, bro? It feels like an obvious one for him. Come on, Ed, care about the planet. Yeah, it's a good under. And I think it's like, one of the problems I think that we have is in this increasingly polarized, resurgent far right world is that Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson, and the assembled right-wing populists have a really clear story about what is wrong in the UK and who's to blame: asylum seekers, trans activists. And the left often, and especially this Labour government, doesn't have a competing story to be like, this is why everything's awful and things are expensive and it's your wages aren't going up, but prices are going up and life is hard. And the truth is it is companies like Drax, right? They're making out like bandits. They're already making money from burning the pellets. We're subsidizing them from burning the pellets. They're lying about what pellets they're burning. And until we villainize and point the finger at the real culprits who are destroying our environment and our economy, then we can't really compete with the far right, right? So it matters because we shouldn't be burning down these trees. And it matters because it's a way of explaining what's going on in the world that doesn't involve pointing the finger at vulnerable groups.
I should probably also just disclose that I'm managing director of Stand.Earth, who created this research.
Oh, great. So it's you exposed it and you found the whistleblower. Yeah. That's so cool. How do you find a whistleblower? Do they come to you or do you kind of sidle up to them?
I can't take credit for that. We have a team of incredible campaigners who work on this, who did that work. And I'm not sure how they got in contact.
I just feel in my heart that my under the radar for the week has to be Trump's FIFA Peace Prize. So for those who missed it, last Friday, Donald Trump received a prize from FIFA, governing body of football, for a peace prize. It was the inaugural FIFA Peace Prize. It was a giant gold trophy, it was a gold medal, and it was a framed certificate for his efforts towards world peace. I wanted it to be my under the radar because I think it's like a neat summary of a lot of things about the world today. Also because these are dark times. There's a lot of heavy stuff going on. And I genuinely, the Trump FIFA Peace Prize has given me more than one chuckle over the last few days. So for those who are not paying close attention, Donald Trump really wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize. He's actually wanted to win it for like quite some time. If reports are correct, it's because Barack Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize, rightly or wrongly. I think before he even became president, it was like a weird sort of like everyone was fanboying about Obama in '08, and then Nobel Committee were like, get the Peace Prize. So Donald Trump wanted the Nobel Peace Prize because Obama won the Peace Prize. And again, if reports to be believed, he got his son-in-law Jared Kushner to be like a Middle East envoy because he's like, I want the Peace Prize, get me the Peace Prize. Didn't get it in his first term. And so in his second term, rather than this being this sort of like covert thing, he just started to get a bit more explicit about it. Some would call it manifesting. You know, he was like, I want this thing. I'm going to tell people I want this thing. He wants the Peace Prize. So he starts bringing it up. In the summer, he cold called the Norwegian finance minister. So for context, Nobel Prize given out in Norway. So yeah, the Norwegian finance minister got a cold call from Donald Trump talking about the Nobel Peace Prize and tariffs, but like probably more about the Peace Prize. And so you've seen as well, like sort of sycophantic people starting to say, oh, Donald Trump should get the Peace Prize. Like he's done so much for peace. Arguably a lot of the stuff he's been doing in Ukraine and Israel and Palestine is because he wants to get the Peace Prize. And unfortunately, this year, the Nobel Peace Prize was not awarded to Donald Trump. Okay, so step in Gianni Infantino, new president of FIFA. Well, newish. He's been president for quite some time. Gianni Infantino he's already been tweeting that he thought Donald Trump definitely deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. Obviously, as a, leading expert in football, he's one of the people that should be weighing in. So he'd sort of been, like subtly saying, giving Trump a bit of support on social media. Next World Cup which FIFA is in charge of running, kind of its raison d'etre, is going to be in the United States. So we had the draw for next year's tournament in the Kennedy Center in America. Donald Trump was there, all the fanfare. Infantino awards Trump this prize. Like then Trump gives a speech, like an acceptance speech. It's just like honestly beyond everything. He's like, you've got a medal. You could put the medal on now. Like he puts it on. It's like a sort of weird combo of like a Make-A-Wish thing and just all of the pomp. Sidebar, Infantino has turned up 2 hours late to the ceremony because he's hanging out with Trump. And yeah, then Donald Trump puts the medal around his neck, accepts the award, and, I guess gives the speech he wanted to give if the Nobel Committee had just honored him. So, I think it's flying under the radar because, A, this is absolutely ludicrous and we should be talking about it more. And B, I just think, one of the most corrupt organizations in the world giving Donald Trump the medal he's been lobbying for and, manufacturing a peace prize. There has never been a FIFA Peace Prize before this. Somehow, for me, just, really summarizes the strange late stage capitalist world that we're in. And I just think FIFA, which for those who follow it, has been mired in corruption scandals for decades at this point. There was a huge scandal 10 years ago where FIFA officials were arrested for bribery, corruption. It's a pretty open secret that often the country that hosts the World Cup has shelled out quite a lot of money. And Infantino, who's been criticized by Sepp Blatter, also wild energy. I just kind of love that FIFA, this incredibly corrupt organization, was just give the guy what he wants, give him his baubles. So I just think we should be enjoying the story as just the ludicrous thing that it is. That's my under the radar. Had you heard about the FIFA Peace Prize before I brought it up?
I had.
Okay.
And
fair.
My first reaction was, why the fuck is FIFA giving out a Peace Prize?
Then you saw who won it, and then did you know that Trump wants the Nobel? He wants the Nobel.
I did. I love your description of it as Make-A-Wish.
because it was. He was like, and there's a certificate, and there's a medal, and there's a big gold. Like the trophy's freaking huge. It's like the size of the World Cup. It's like they're giving him a mini World Cup.
I saw it. It's absolutely absurd.
For me, it sort of like, fits in the level
it's
of
everything the right hates. It's like, it's the medal for like participation.
You're right. This is so rad. Yeah, all the far right people are like, oh, schools are terrible. Kids are getting medals for participation. And then Trump gets it. That's why I love it. It's ludicrous and it's ridiculous and it's like gaudy. And like FIFA is this ridiculous institution. Sidebar, FIFA is still legally a non-profit in Switzerland. Wild. Like, it's just something about all of it. It's just like, this is it. This is the world we live in. And if we can't laugh at it, we're going to cry. 100%. And I just love that Trump was into it. And then immediately afterwards, which it does talk to his bigger point, immediately afterwards, he's then talking about the fact that Americans call football soccer and maybe we should change that. And I just was like, it's already bought them access, it's already bought them what they want. And like, it really reminded me of when the Qataris got Trump a plane, of just like, in this area of diplomacy, like, get him shiny things. That plane has done a lot of work. It's brought them a lot of favor.
I think he just likes to be called good boy.
Yeah, he just wants to be patted on the head.
Yeah.
Just wants like a little pat, little shiny trophy, maybe a plane. He was going on about that plane for weeks. You met the South African president, Ramaphosa, and was like, the Qataris bought me a plane. And it was like, it is like dealing with a 5-year-old, but the 5-year-old is like the most powerful man in the world, or one of the most powerful men in the world, and has access to nuclear weapons. It has flown under the radar, at least, I think, because it falls between the like sports journalists, like, and political journalists. Like, it isn't like, it's who's going to cover it. Since we are talking about FIFA and Trump and their Nobel Peace Prize, I think it is also worth saying that like 10 years on from the huge scandal that I think was broken by the Sunday Times of like widespread corruption in FIFA, a report from a campaign group did say that FIFA is arguably more poorly governed today than a decade ago. And I mean, this FIFA president brought in a rule. I mean, I think in a sense it was appropriate for him to get the award because he brought in a rule a year ago that the World Cup would be signed by him and have his name on it. He received a medal from Vladimir Putin, who he said hosted the best World Cup ever. So like, people who are questioning the Peace Prize, I'm like, this is on brand. This 100% fits. And I just think it's this like corrupt, sketchy men who are egomaniacs, like giving themselves awards. And like, could we somehow turn this into a thing that just meant none of them were running any countries? They're just like giving themselves like more elaborate awards and prizes for like made up shit that they did. Like, could this be a way of sidetracking crazy right-wing egomaniacs by just like giving them lots of awards, lots of ceremonies, maybe like a TV show? I don't know. But like, as long as he's on the stage talking about his Peace Prize, he's not, signing more executive orders. So that's got to be a good thing.
Let's give him a Best Fake Tan award. He'd love that.
Oh my God, yeah. Okay, I guess we'll leave it at that. Thank you for listening to Over the Top, Under the Radar. And thank you, Nim, for joining me. You're an amazing co-host. I hope you had fun.
It's been very fun. Love to be here.
We will link to Nim and their work so you can follow them on social media, and you can follow us on social media at over_under_pod_. Thanks for listening.